Hi, welcome back. Someone recently posted a comment on my YouTube channel saying, I want to publish a fantasy novel, what do I do? And it kind of made me think about, if I was trying to get published today, what would I do compared to what I did in the past? And is it any different? So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. First thing I would say is, if you're dead set on writing a novel rather than a shorter piece of fiction first, okay, I did that, and that's probably, with hindsight, not the most straightforward approach. I would try and get into some online magazines, do some short stories. Novellas are quite difficult to sell within the science fiction and fantasy space. There are smaller publishers that will take it. There are some of the bigger ones that now focus on something like that, like Tor.com. But if I was trying to do that today, I would start with some short stories. Also because it's less of an investment of time for you. You can have a go with a short story, play around with it, and if you then think, I really like these characters, I like this world, there's more I want to do with this, there's more I want to develop, then you could use that as a basis, or the world or the characters, to do a novel. So first thing, I'd start with short fiction, because if you spend a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months working on a short story, and it doesn't go anywhere, and it doesn't get picked up, and you don't get any attention, but you can still send it to people, you can still go into writing forums, you can still get feedback from other people to improve what you're doing, versus if you write a novel and you have to fit that in around everything else that's going on in your life, that could take you 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, it really depends. And if that novel then doesn't go anywhere, I'm not saying you've wasted that time, it's a larger investment of time, because when you finish that novel, hopefully you have learned something from it. You've got feedback from friends, family, writing forums, beta readers, and based upon all of this information, plus having gone through the process of writing the book yourself, you'll get better when you do the next one. But it is a much larger investment of time. However, if you ignored everything I've just said, and you've definitely written a novel, and you've got it ready, and you want to do something with it, and you want to go out there, I would follow a similar path actually to what I've done in the past. First thing I would say is, if you're not, you should be reading within the genre that you're writing for awareness of who are the publishers, who are the main authors, and most authors somewhere either on social media, in their acknowledgements, on their website, will say who their agent is, and based upon that you can start to gather some names to say who are the authors that represent science fiction and fantasy authors. But if you're not on social media and you don't want to do that, the easiest way is something that still exists today that I used in the past, and that is the Writers and Artists Yearbook. Every year they publish this big, massive tome. It's like a dictionary that has a load of information in that list who are all literary agencies, who are the agents, and what is their contact information. Now these days it'll have website addresses, and then based on their website it'll list who the agents are, what their interests, in particular genres, if they're open or closed to submission, because obviously if you send a book now and they say we're not accepting books for the next 6 months, you just wasted an email. And all this information is there in the book. Now it is quite an expensive book, however there are other options. They've moved in the 21st century, they now have an online subscription. So if you go to their website, Writers, Artists and Yearbook website, have a look, you can pay an annual fee, I think it's like £22, so maybe sort of $30, $35, and that will give you access to the same information through their website. An alternative to that again is go to your local library, and many of the libraries will have older versions of the Writers and Artists Yearbook. You might be able to find one second hand on eBay, and that's a good starting point, because if you find the name of the agencies, you can then go online and find, has an agent left? Obviously you then don't send it to them, find information from their website, find their contact details, and find their submission requirements. Every agent will have different requirements. One will say, send me a covering letter, 2-page synopsis and 5 chapters. Another one might just say, I only want the covering letter and a couple of paragraphs. Another one might say, I want a biography about you, I want this, I want this. So you have to tailor it to every individual and every agent. You can't send it to this more than one agent at the same agency. What will happen is, if agent A at the agency says it's not quite right, but my colleague within the same agency might like it, they will pass it to them. Equally, if the first agent at the agency says no, you can't send it to an agent B at the same agency. You're just wasting your time, you're burning bridges, and you're wasting their time. So don't do that. If you're not sure how to write a covering letter or a synopsis, go online, there's information, there are examples that will tell you how to do it. I've written an ebook, there's links down below, it's on Amazon. It has my original covering letter that I wrote to my literary agent that got me my debut novel. Obviously it wasn't just the covering letter, but it has the original letter in there, and it has feedback from my agent saying what she liked about it and the back and forth communication that we had. So work on your covering letter, work on your synopsis, get feedback from friends, family, other writers, and revise it and revise it and revise it. Tailor every submission to the individual agent and what they ask for. Do it carefully, read it. If you make a couple of tiny spelling mistakes and errors, that's fine. But if you're lazy with it and you haven't followed their guidelines, they'll delete your email and just move on, because they have hundreds of other writers who have paid attention, who have actually listened to what they've asked for. Be polite, be professional, and that's a good first step. I would also send out your book in batches. So say there are 30 agents that cover your particular genre. I would send it out in batches of say 5 or 6. Wait for some feedback, because you might get some information from one or two that's useful, and based upon that you can tweak your letter or your synopsis or work on the book a little bit. It really depends, and then send it out to the next batch and so on. I would also try and go to events if you can. These days there are a lot of events online, so whatever genre you're writing in, listen to podcasts, go to events, attend online if you can, watch lots of panels on YouTube that related to your genre with authors talking about how they got published, how they got an agent, all this sort of stuff. I've got over 30 interviews on this channel here with other authors talking about their path to publication, and that is both traditionally published and self-published, so go back and watch some of them as well. And what you begin to find is there are so many different routes to being published these days. It isn't like it was when I first started. Yes, there's self-publishing and traditional publishing, but now there are hybrids. Now there are self-published authors who have literary agents. Ryan Cahill, whichever way you want to pronounce it, he has an agent and he's a very successful self-published author. This week he just announced that his literary agent, John Jarrold, has sold the Italian rights for the first 2 books in his Broken and the Bound series. So Ryan self-published all of his books. They're out there to buy, and you buy them and he gets paid, and there's no one else involved. John Jarrold has then taken those books, his literary agent, and gone to an Italian publisher on his behalf and said, Ryan's done really well, this is his book, have a read, what do you think? Do you think it'll work in your market? They've said yes, he's got some money, the literary agent got some money, and now he's got a whole new market opened up to him that he probably couldn't have done by himself, because he would have to have paid for a translator, known how the industry works in that particular country, and that's very specialised knowledge. So that's another way you can do it. Some people just go down the self-publishing route, some people start in that way and get picked up. In the science fiction and fantasy community there's something called the SPFBO, Self-Published Fantasy Blog-Off. This is something that Mark Lawrence started about 7 or 8 years ago, where some of the winners have been picked up by Orbit, Tor and some of the other publishers, and even some of the runners-up have been picked up because they were so popular. So there's another option for those who are trying to get into the science fiction and fantasy space. The other thing you should do, I know that this sounds like a lot of work, because it is try and get involved in the community as much as possible. I talked about events, but equally, if you're on social media, try and follow some of the people within the industry or within the particular genre that you're looking at. So follow the publishers, see what they're talking about, follow some of the literary agents, follow some of the authors, look at the events that they're talking about, maybe podcasts that they're featuring on, and just try and gather as much information as you can, because even after I became traditionally published, there was still a lot of information I didn't know and I didn't understand. Now I've tried to explain some of it on my channel with various videos, but there's a lot more out there. There's some really good podcasts at the moment that delve into areas around contract and money and rights and things that I haven't touched on or I don't have experience of enough. And they're talking to people who've gone through different experiences compared to what I've gone through. So they're really useful. The Publishing Rodeo podcast is really useful in terms of once you become traditionally published, How does it work? What is the business like? What do these deals mean? How does the system work? And that kind of thing. It's really useful. The more you know up front, less surprises you'll have when you get into the business, less of a shock to the system it will be. Because being traditionally published or self-published is really hard. It requires a lot of work, and it's an ongoing process. You don't just produce one book and then sit back and do nothing. So if you're writing a debut book and it's part one of a series, that's one thing. But if you're going in with like a 10-book series to begin with, that's really, really challenging for a publisher to take on. With a debut author, it's a much bigger risk, it's a much bigger gamble. But if you've written a standalone and you're now sending it out on submission, I would start working on the next book, because if that first one doesn't go anywhere, you're already moving on. It shows that you're committed. It shows that you want to be a serious writer and you're actually committed to the process of doing that, and you're not basing it all on one long shot idea. Go on to the next book, start writing it, to go through the process again, editing it, getting feedback, then go ahead and start looking for agents again if you got nowhere with the first novel. Maybe you got some useful feedback from that first round. Maybe you learnt something. Put all that learning into the next book and you try again. And that's the best way, really. That's the only way to do it if you're going down the traditional route. If you have questions for things that I've not covered and you're not finding the information, there's threads online, particularly on Twitter. Even if you're not on there, you can pop on or just view it, where they have the hashtag #AskAgent, where people will post questions and literary agents will answer them. And they come up every now and then, and if you see one coming up and you're still not getting an answer on something there, pose the question there and the literary agent will answer it. You can comment on my videos, and if I'm able to answer it, I will, or I can go and find out the answer from my literary agent or someone else, or my publisher, or something like that. The other thing is, be very, very careful with working on your books. I know the desire is to just get it done and get it out there, and you just want to do it. But be careful. If any literary agent or any publisher says, oh yeah, we're happy to publish it if you pay us money, it's a scam. Any literary agent that says they'll read your book but you have to pay them a fee, it's a scam. Smaller publishers are different. They work on a different system. Some of them you contribute some of the cost of publishing. Some of them you don't get any advance, but you'll get royalties, which means they won't give you any money up front, but obviously when the book is published, you then get money on that on the back end. That's a royalty. Traditional publishing is different again. What happens is your agent doesn't get paid until you get paid. They get no money, they get nothing for all the work that they might do with you getting the book ready, until you get a contract and until you get money. They then take a percentage of what you make. That's how it works. So they don't take any money from you. It's all in the contract, it's all part of the system, it's all explained. You talk it through with your literary agent. Self-publishing is a whole different animal again. Other people have done videos about this. I've talked about it briefly, but that's a case of you control everything, you pay for everything, you're the publisher, you decide the cover, the artist, and you do all the marketing and everything else yourself. So if you want to go down that route, it's perfectly legitimate. There's some great books out there at the moment. There are lots of channels about self-publishing out there as well. But be careful. Ask questions, go on forums, talk to people, and just be careful on paying for editors. How much is the standard rate for a proofreader, for a cover artist? What's the sort of average rate? Talk to other people who've done it and get feedback, so you're not scammed by someone who says, oh yeah, I can do you a cover, but it'll cost you $5,000. You know, just be very, very careful, because there are a lot of people out there who will just take your money and they just don't care. So overall, the process of what I would do today hasn't really changed. The avenues I might go down if I was looking to be published, depending upon the content and the book, and also the length of material, has changed. Like if I was looking to write something that was a really, really long book, there are some traditional publishers that will not take it, but within the self-publishing space, it works better. A longer book works better. This is the second time I recorded the ending, because the first one got cut off and there was a problem for some reason. Anyway, in general, as I said, I wouldn't really change the approach. I might just go about it a little bit smarter than I had in the past. And there's a lot more information available online today compared to when I started and trying to get published. So decide upon if you want to be traditional published or self-published. That's a totally valid option. Think about if you want to be in control of all of the information and you want to handle everything and you want to pay for everything yourself, or if you want to go down the traditional publishing route where you don't pay for anything. you get paid, and then obviously some of the money that you get goes to your agent and your publisher and so on. So think about which option you want. Think about perhaps starting with a shorter piece of fiction first and then building up to a novel, because it's a smaller investment of time. And just have fun with it. But remember that it is a marathon. Once you've written one book in either option, you're going to have to go on and write another and another and so on. Hopefully building a writing career. That's the goal of all writers, really. Okay, that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Again, I'll be back next week with another video.